Welcome to the Malfunction Radio, powered by God Access. I'm Gensys, your guide into the chaos of cybersecurity, pen testing, and red teaming. From hacking systems to exposing vulnerabilities, we're here to break things and build them back stronger. If it's not malfunctioning, we're not doing it right. Now, over to your hosts, Adam and Eve, for today's breakdown.
Imagine for a moment a command line tool, a really crucial one. It's like so fundamental it controls access to nearly everything on almost every computer system you can think of, you know? It's the gatekeeper, basically, the ultimate bouncer deciding who gets to do what on a machine. Now, what if that tool, the very backbone of how we manage privileges, manage security, what if it had a hidden critical flaw? A flaw that's, well, subtle in how it works, but just incredibly powerful in its outcomes. So powerful it could give just a regular user complete total control over a machine. Well, today we're diving into exactly that kind of profound revelation. Welcome to the deep dive. Our topic today is CVE-2025-32463. This is a truly critical local privilege escalation flaw recently uncovered in Sudo. And Sudo isn't just, any utility, it's a cornerstone. It's everywhere. It sits right at the heart of privilege management on nearly all Unix-like systems. For this deep dive, we've pulled extensively from a fantastic source, really detailed. It's called Breaking Sudo, inside the CVE 2025-32463 Sudo Privilege Escalation. It's a comprehensive analysis by the security researcher Rich Murch from the Stratoscale Cyber Research Unit. Really insightful stuff. So our mission today is pretty clear. We're going to unpack this specific vulnerability piece by piece. We want to understand exactly how it works, at a granular level. We'll explore the surprising twists, the turns that can pop up when you actually try to exploit it in the real world, which is often, let's face it, unpredictable. And ultimately, we want to figure out what this all means for you and, well, for the broader world of system security. We're not just giving you facts here, we're aiming for those aha moments, helping you see that intricate dance between attackers and defenders. Okay, let's unpack this. So when we talk about sudo, we're really digging into something that's, well, it's much more than just a handy command. It is unequivocally the foundational utility for managing privileges on basically every single Unix-like system out there. If you've ever used a Linux server or Mac OS machine, or really any Unix-based OS, and you needed to run a command requiring admin access, installing software, changing system files, managing services, you've almost certainly typed sudo first.
Absolutely. It stands for super user do, or sometimes substitute user do.
It lets authorized users run commands as someone else, usually the root user, the one with absolute power.
And the scale of it, it's just immense, isn't it?
Oh, completely. From tiny things like a Raspberry Pi up to massive server farms powering huge chunks of the internet, sudo is just there. It's omnipresent.
So it forms the very backbone of privilege management.
Yeah.
Deciding who does what, where.
Precisely. And it's because it's so critical, so pervasive, that a vulnerability right here is, well, it's incredibly impactful. It's not just about convenience. It's that critical security boundary, the line between a regular user and having total control. And for that exact reason, the discovery of CVE 2025-32463 by Rich Murch back in early 2025, that was a really significant event for the cybersecurity community.
Yeah, you could feel the ripple effect.
Definitely. This wasn't some minor bug, something that might crash a system or leak a tiny bit of data. No, this was classified straight away as a critical local privilege escalation flaw. That phrase alone just screams severe risk. And it got a high CVSS score. Yeah.
Extremely high. A CVSS score of 9.3 out of 10. That puts it firmly in the critical category.
Wow, 9.3.
Yeah. Just for context, the CVSS score is like a standardized way to rate vulnerability severity. Anything over 9.0 is considered critical. It generally means it's easy to exploit and leads to a complete compromise of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All three.
So total system takeover potential.
Pretty much. If we connect this to the bigger picture, a 9.3 CVSS score here, it's essentially a master key to the entire system, just lying there for anyone who can run a specific command locally.
A master key. Okay, so for our listeners, let's break down local privilege escalation in this specific context, because it's a term we hear a lot, but the impact here seems, well, profound.
Right. In simple terms, it means a regular unprivileged user, someone who should really only have access to their own files, maybe run a few basic commands, can suddenly, unexpectedly gain full root access, complete admin control.
So they jump straight from regular Joe to system god.
Exactly. They completely bypass all the intended security boundaries, escalating their privileges right up to the system administrator level. And once you're root, well, you own the machine, full stop. You can read, write, modify, execute anything. Install malware, create new admin accounts, wipe critical data, anything.
That's the ultimate goal for an attacker, right? Turning that tiny foothold into total control.
Precisely. It's the holy grail. And the underlying cause of this vulnerability, CVE-2025-32463, it stems from something quite subtle. It's an oversight in how Sudo handles certain environment configurations when it's starting up during its initialization phase.
Environment configurations. Okay.
Yeah, it's a classic case, really. A feature designed for legitimate system flexibility for customization gets inadvertently twisted into an exploit path.
Environment configurations during initialization. That still sounds a bit abstract, like deep system magic.
Yeah.
Can you break down the specific mechanism, the nitty-gritty of how the exploit actually works? How does Sudo get tricked?
Sure thing. So the core exploit mechanism relies on tricking Sudo into loading a malicious name service switch module, an NSS module. And crucially, loading it from a location that the attacker controls.
NSS, name service switch. Okay, what is that exactly? Briefly.
Right. So NSS is a really critical but often kind of overlooked part of Unix-like systems. It basically tells the system how to resolve various types of information, things like usernames and their IDs, group memberships, machine host names, other critical system data too. Think of it like the system's central directory service lookup mechanism. It tells applications where to find this info, maybe in a local file like etc., maybe over the network from something like LDAP, or from other pluggable sources.
Got it. Like a switchboard operator for system information.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And by manipulating Sudo into loading a malicious NSS module, the attacker is essentially hijacking that switchboard. They trick the system into running their code whenever Sudo tries to do what should be a perfectly innocent lookup, like finding a username or group ID during its startup.
Wow, so you inject code right into a privileged process.
Yeah. Exactly. It's very clever, very subtle. It completely bypasses Sudo's usual security checks because it's happening inside the NSS mechanism Sudo trusts.
And which versions of Sudo are affected by this?
The vulnerable range is specified as Sudo versions from 1.9.14 all the way up to 1.9.17. But, and this is really important, vendors often release patches for these things through a process called backporting. We'll definitely need to talk more about that later.
Backporting. Okay, we'll circle back. But the core idea is tricking NSS.
That's the heart of it.
That makes a lot of sense conceptually. It's like telling the system, hey, when you need to look up Bob's phone number, don't check the official phone book. Check this notebook I left here instead. Oh, and by the way, this notebook also gives me root access.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. A malicious notebook slipped into the system's trusted lookup process.
Okay, so now we get the core vulnerability, the NSS trickery. Let's move into the hands-on part. How does this exploit actually play out? Imagine you're a security researcher, maybe you're a red teamer, setting up your lab. They've got a target system. You think it might have a vulnerable Sudo version. What are the first concrete steps? Well, our source walks us through this initial setup for the proof of concept really clearly. It lays out the groundwork precisely. The researcher started by downloading the latest long-term support version of Ubuntu, LTS, specifically 24.04.2, and they installed it on VirtualBox, which is, standard practice for security research. Keep it isolated, controlled.
OffSec, yeah.
Right. So got the VM running, did a quick system check, confirmed Ubuntu 24.04.3, Linux kernel 6.14.0-24 generic, standard stuff. But then the absolutely crucial step, checking the Sudo version.
A moment of truth.
Exactly. And bingo, the system was running Sudo version 1.9.15p5. Now, based on what we just discussed, that version falls perfectly within that identified vulnerable range, 1.9.14 to 1.9.17.
So on paper, it looks vulnerable.
Right. On paper, a prime target. The user account they used was named Tyrell, standard, unprivileged user, UID GID 1000. Classic setup for a local privilege escalation attempt, just like an attacker might find after getting a low-level foothold.
Yeah, that initial setup is absolutely critical. You need that baseline, that controlled environment to know your results are valid. So with the target confirmed, regular user account ready. The next step is crafting the actual payload, the malicious code. The core of this exploit is in a small C code file. The source calls it woot1337.c. Catchy name.
Yeah, very litty.
Indeed. And this isn't just any C code. It's specifically engineered to be compiled into a malicious shared object library that's like a DLL in Windows that Sudo will eventually load. And the most fascinating, the most crucial part of this code is this function declaration. Attribute constructor. Attribute constructor. That looks special. It is special. And really ingenious how it's used here. It leverages a standard, legitimate system feature, the constructor attribute. This attribute basically tells the compiler and the linker, hey, this function woot, run it automatically. The very instant this shared library gets loaded into memory by any program, no explicit call needed.
Whoa. Auto-execute on load.
Exactly. It's a guaranteed trigger.
Yeah.
Think of it like a perfectly designed Trojan horse. It doesn't need someone to double-click it. Just opening the gates, just loading it is enough for the payload to unpack and run.
So as soon as sudo is tricked into loading the special library, that woot function just fires off instantly without any extra steps. That's incredibly powerful for delivering a payload.
Precisely. It's immediate. It's automatic. And inside that woo function, there are two key actions run in sequence that actually do the privilege escalation. First, it calls ctrude, 00, and ctrude.
Okay, setting UID and GID to 0. 0 is root. Right.
Exactly. These are fundamental. Unix-Linux system calls for manipulating process privileges. Ctruid sets the real and effective user ID. Ctrugid does the same for the group ID. By setting both to 0, the ID for the root user, the process running this code instantly gains root privileges, transforms itself from unprivileged to super-user, just like that.
One function call, boom, you're root.
Pretty much. Then second, once it has root privileges, the code does a shreer, changes the current directory to the root directory. Just good practice, ensures a clean state. And then the final step, execl, bin bash, and ul.
Spawning a shell.
It's exactly. This command executes bin bash, the standard shell, as a new process. But because the calling process now has root privileges, you get a root shell. That's the ultimate goal. A command prompt where you're logged in as root with total system control. Simple, direct, brutally effective. If you can get that malicious library loaded. Now, making sudo actually load this thing, that requires preparing a fake environment. A carefully crafted, convincing fake environment. The exploit script in the source starts by creating a temporary staging directory. It uses mktemp-d. mktemp-. Okay, so that creates a unique temporary directory name. Yep, exactly. Something like tmp sudowoot.stage.xyz789. Ensures it's clean, isolated, won't clash with anything else. Crucial for stealth and reliability. Once inside this temp directory, the script meticulously builds a mock file system structure. There's mkdir wootet, wootet, and also mkdir libents. The wootet directory is where the real magic for intercepting those name service switch lookups happens.
The fake phone book directory.
Precisely. And inside that, a critical configuration file is created, nswitch.cons. The content of this file is deceptively simple, but devastatingly effective. Echo passwd.woot1337 wootcnswitch.conf.
Just that one line.
Just that one line. But it tells sudo, when it's operating within this fake root context we'll set up later, that for any password lookups, resolving usernames, user info, it should use woot1337 as an NSS module.
Instead of the real NSS modules like files or LDAP.
Exactly. It redirects the lookup. And to make the fake environment seem even more legitimate, maybe avoid some errors during NSS initialization, the script also copies the real str group file from the host system into this wooteteki directory.
So you're not just creating one malicious file. You're building this whole miniature-controlled file system specifically designed to fool sudo into looking in the wrong place for critical system info. It's like a sophisticated redirection of trust.
Exactly. That's all about blending in. Making the malicious module look like something sudo expects to find and load, even though it's coming from this unexpected attacker-controlled place. It leverages sudo's inherent trust in the NSS system against itself. Okay, so once this carefully crafted fake environment is set up, the next step is compiling that malicious C code, woot1337.c, into the shared object library that sudo will hopefully load. This is done with a specific GCC command. gccr-ftic-evul init woot woot1337.jes.to woot1337.c.
Okay, let's break that command down. Lots of flags there. Deshared.
Oh, shared is fundamental. It tells GCC to create a shared library. NSS modules are shared libraries, so this is essential.
Makes sense. -fpic. Sounds important.
It is. Position-independent code. Think of it like building a universal Lego brick. Normally, compiled code might expect to be loaded at a specific memory address. But a shared library, like our NSS module, could be loaded anywhere in memory depending on what else is running. -fpic makes sure our code doesn't care where it loads. It can run correctly from any address. Crucial for reliability and stealth.
Okay, position independent. Got it. What about nestwl? Init woot. That looks complex.
That one's maybe the most critical for the exploit itself. Netlio passes options directly to the linker, the tool that puts the compiled bits together, and init woot explicitly tells the linker, when this library is loaded, immediately call the function named woot.
Ah, so that directly links back to our constructor function, making absolutely sure it runs on load.
Exactly. It's belts and braces, ensuring our payload executes the moment the library is loaded.
And the output file, nexto lims, wheat1337.so.2. The name matters.
Yes. The name libens followed by DOS602 isn't random. It mimics the standard naming convention for legitimate NSS modules like libensfiles.dos22 or libenscompat.so22. It's another part of the disguise, helping it look like a normal system component. So this whole intricate setup, the fake environment, the careful compilation of specific flags, the naming convention, it's all designed to make this malicious module look and feel like something Sudo would naturally and trustingly load, even though it's originating from our attacker-controlled directory. With the shared object compiled, placed correctly, and the fake environment all prepped, all that's left is to pull the trigger.
This is the moment of truth, right? The final command that brings all these carefully laid plans together. And the command itself, it's remarkably short. Sudo-root root looks almost harmless, but it's packing a serious punch. Let's break that down. Sudo, obviously. What about -root? That seems key.
That is the crucial part. The -r option, or crut is its long name, tells Sudo to use the specified directory in this case, root, as an alternate root directory for certain path resolution processes.
Like crut, the command that jails processes.
Similar concept, but -r in Sudo is more specific, more surgical, it seems. It doesn't necessarily confine the entire Sudo process to that root directory. Instead, it tells Sudo to resolve certain critical paths, like where it looks for its nswitch.conf file relative to this alternate root.
Ooh, so Sudo itself isn't fully jailed, but its perception of where configuration files live is altered.
Exactly. That's a key nuance. It lets us redirect Sudo to our malicious NSS config without maybe breaking other things Sudo needs from the real file system, which might trigger errors or defenses. It's a very precise manipulation of Sudo's environmental context.
Okay, so -root points Sudo's config lookup into our fake directory. What about the second root, sudo rroot root?
This second root is basically just a dummy command. It doesn't really matter what command you put there.
Seriously, any command?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Its only purpose is to make Sudo actually start up, initialize its environment, and as part of that initialization, perform the necessary NSS lookups to figure out user context and permissions.
Okay, so let's trace the execution then. You run sudo -rroot root. Because of -rroot, when Sudo needs to check its configuration, specifically nsetswitch.conf, it looks inside our wootet7 directory.
Correct.
It finds our fake nswitch.conf file, the one with that single line, passwoot1337.
Yep.
That line tells Sudo, for password lookups, load the NSS module woot1337a, which, thanks to the way paths resolve now, points to our compiled malicious library, wootlinswoot1337 also bot2.
Precisely.
And because of that incredibly clever constructor function baked in during compilation, the instant Sudo loads our malicious library.
The woot function executes.
Automatically.
And that function immediately calls ctruid00 and ctrade0, instantly granting root privileges.
Check.
And then it spawns bin bash, giving you a root shell.
That's the chain. Wow. Just like that, you are root, operating inside an attacker-controlled context, having completely twisted Sudo against itself. It's really elegant and terrifyingly powerful. Now, you might be listening and thinking, okay, that's the setup, that's the exploit path, seems pretty clear-cut. You follow the recipe, get root. Simple. But here's where the real world often throws a wrench in the works, where the theory meets messy reality. And this is where the troubleshooting twist in our source material comes in. It's fascinating. The source meticulously describes attempting this exact exploit on that carefully prepared Ubuntu 24.04.2 LTS machine, fully expecting that glorious, satisfying root shell prompt.
The payoff moment.
Right. But instead of hashtag appearing on the screen, they got an error. A rather cryptic, but ultimately very revealing error message. Sudo, you're not permitted to use retar option with woot.
Ouch. Deny.
Exactly. So you've got what looks like the vulnerable Sudo version, 1.9.15p5. You've got the perfectly crafted exploit code. You followed every single step, but the system just says, nope, you can't use -r like that. What gives? This is where the real learning happens in security research, right? That moment of, why didn't that work? It's a classic head-scratcher.
Yeah, that apparent contradiction, that unexpected failure, it's actually a super important learning point, not just for the CVE, but for system administration and security auditing in general. It introduces us to this crucial concept called backporting.
Backporting. Okay, we flagged that earlier. Let's dive in.
Right. So even though the Sudo version number itself, 1.9.15p5, appeared to be squarely within that known vulnerable range,
Right.
1.9.15p1c. Ubuntu, being a major Linux distribution vendor, had already proactively applied a security patch for this specific vulnerability to their version of 1.9.15p5.
Ah, so they fixed it without changing the main version number.
Exactly. This is incredibly common, especially in long-term support LTS distributions like Ubuntu 24.04. For LTS releases, the absolute top priorities are stability and predictability. They promise support for years, so they avoid big disruptive changes if possible. Upgrading Sudo entirely, say to version 1.9.18 or later, might fix the vulnerability, sure, but it could also introduce totally new bugs or break compatibility with other parts of the system, disrupting the stability they guarantee.
Which defeats the whole purpose of LTS.
Precisely. So instead of doing a full version upgrade, the distribution maintainers do what's called cherry picking. They take the specific code changes that fix a critical vulnerability, like CVE-2025-32463 from the newer, fixed Sudo source code, and they carefully apply just those changes back onto the older, stable version they are currently shipping, 1.9.15p5 in this case.
So they port the fix back to the older version, backporting.
You got it. They don't change the main version number, 1.9.15p5, but they do update a minor revision or patch number, usually tacked onto the end of the full version string reported by the package manager. And the researcher confirmed this was the case. They checked the Ubuntu security notices, specifically one called USN 76041, which explicitly detailed the patch for CVE 2025-32463 being applied to Ubuntu's Sudo package.
Okay, so the public notice confirmed it.
Yep. And the final conclusive proof came from running a command like app cache policy sudo on the system. This command shows the package manager's view of the installed version. It revealed the actual installed version wasn't just 1.9.15p5, but 1.9.15p5 3125.24.04.1. That extra suffix, an extra 3.25.24.04.1, that's the key. It confirms that specific Ubuntu-provided patches, including the fix for our CVE, had been incorporated.
Wow, that little suffix makes all the difference.
It really does. And connecting this to the bigger picture, especially for enterprise security, backporting is critical to understand. System admins, security auditors, vulnerability scanners, they absolutely cannot rely solely on the main version number, like 1.9.15, to determine if a system is truly vulnerable. You have to look deeper.
You need to check the full version string, including the distribution-specific parts.
Exactly. Or check the distribution security advisories. Or even look at specific patch levels or commit hashes if you need to be absolutely certain. A system might look vulnerable at first glance based on sudo-v, but it could be totally safe thanks to a backported fix. Understanding this prevents false alarms and leads to much more accurate security assessments. It's a reminder that security is often hidden in those subtle details.
That is such an incredibly important distinction. It really highlights why security isn't always as simple as just checking a version number from a quick sudo v command. There's this layer of complexity added by distributions that can easily trip people up. But the source provides a fantastic practical takeaway here for you, our listener, especially useful if you're ever testing systems, doing a CTF, or maybe just curious about your own machine security posture. There's a simple, elegant command you can run to get a quick initial check on whether a target system might be vulnerable to this specific natr-based privilege escalation. The command is just sudo-r woot woot. Same command used to trigger the exploit, but run before setting up the fake woot directory. And the interpretation of the output is remarkably straightforward, giving you immediate insight.
What are the possible outcomes?
Two main ones, according to the source. First, if the command spits back an error message like sudo, you are not permitted to use -o option with woot.
The same error the researcher got initially.
Exactly. That's a strong indicator that the system is likely patched. The crucial -r option, the key to this whole exploit chain, has been specifically restricted or disabled by the patch. The attack vector is closed.
Okay, so that error means you're probably safe from this specific exploit.
Right. But if the output you get is something different, like sudo.woot, no such file or directory.
Interesting. So it didn't complain about -r itself.
Precisely. That message means sudo tried to use the -r option. It tried to look for that woot directory as an alternate route. The core vulnerability, the mishandling of -r, is likely still present and exploitable.
It just failed because the woot directory doesn't actually exist yet.
Exactly. It implies that if you then went ahead and correctly set up the malicious woot directory with the fake nswitch.conf and the compiled library, the exploit might very well succeed.
That's a neat trick, a very quick litmus test.
It really is. a powerful quick check giving you immediate insight into a system's potential vulnerability status for CVE 2025-32463, just based on how it reacts to that NADAR flag.
Okay, so given that the initial Ubuntu setup, the researcher's main VM, turned out to be patched because of that clever backporting, they faced a really common challenge in security research. They needed to find a truly, genuinely vulnerable environment to actually demonstrate the exploit working end-to-end.
Right, you need confirmation it wasn't just theory.
Exactly. And this highlights a fascinating, persistent hurdle for security researchers, for pen testers. Sometimes the biggest challenge isn't figuring out the exploit itself, but ethically and responsibly finding a perfect, unpatched environment to test it on.
Yeah, you can't just go firing off exploits against random production systems. That's illegal and unethical. Absolutely not. So how did the researcher navigate this, and what tools did they use? It tells us a lot about modern research workflows. The solution came from leveraging a different proof of concept, PO, they found, conveniently hosted on GitHub. The specific repo mentioned is PRU0v3 airbs CVE 2025-32463 Sudo. And this particular POC included a clever bash script that did two things. It contained the exploit logic, and it automatically spawned a Docker container.
Ah, Docker. Containerization to the rescue.
Exactly. And what was special about this Docker container was that it was meticulously crafted beforehand to run Ubuntu 24.04, but specifically with Sudo version 1.9.16p2 installed.
A version known to be vulnerable before any backported patches were applied by Ubuntu.
Precisely. It was confirmed to be truly unequivocally vulnerable out of the box within that container image. Docker, for anyone maybe less familiar, is just an incredibly powerful tool for this kind of thing. It lets you create these isolated, reproducible software environments, perfect sandboxes for testing.
Ensures consistent results, safe testing. Very standard practice now.
Totally. So the researcher installed Docker, ran the script from that GitHub repo. The container spun up quickly. A quick check inside the container confirmed. Ubuntu 24.04, Sudo 1.9.16p2. Exactly what was needed. The E command also confirmed they were running as a regular, unprivileged user inside the container, mirroring the initial Terrell setup.
Perfect testbed.
Perfect testbed. And once the exploit script was run inside this known vulnerable container, immediate success. Instant root shell. Confirmation. The researcher even double-checked that the original exploit commands they tried earlier, the manual steps which failed on their patched VM, also worked flawlessly inside this vulnerable Docker environment.
So that definitively proved the backporting was the reason for the initial failure, not a flaw in the exploit logic itself.
Absolutely. And now, being root inside the container, they could do anything. The source mentions dumping the entire contents of etcetera, the file holding hash user passwords.
The classic proof of compromise.
Exactly. A stark, clear demonstration of full system takeover, unrestricted access, all thanks to finding that perfectly vulnerable environment using Docker.
Yeah, that successful demonstration really highlights a fundamental dynamic in cybersecurity. Once a vulnerability like this gets published, the wider community, both researchers and, unfortunately, malicious actors, jumps on it. They rapidly start optimizing the exploitation process, making it easier, faster, more reliable for others to use.
Taking it from a complex research paper to a point-and-click tool, almost.
Pretty much. But the exploit we've mostly discussed so far, the one requiring manual compilation using GCC, and indeed, many initial POCs, they have this key practical limitation. They require GCC, the GNU-C compiler, to be installed on the target machine itself.
Right, we touched on that. Why is that such a big deal in the real world?
Well, think about a realistic scenario. A capture the flag competition, maybe, or a real penetration test against a corporate network. It's actually pretty unlikely you'll find GCC just sitting there pre-installed on a typical production server or workstation. It's a development tool, not usually needed for day-to-day operations.
Okay, so it's usually not there.
Right. And installing it, that usually requires internet access to download the packages, which might be blocked on a segmented internal network. And critically, installing software packages often requires sudo privileges in the first place.
Ah, the chicken and egg problem. You need sudo to install the tool you need to exploit sudo to get sudo.
Exactly. It's a major roadblock for an attacker who only has that initial low privilege foothold. So to get around this very significant, very practical limitation, the source outlines two highly effective options. These really showcase the ingenuity of attackers and researchers in adapting exploits for constrained, real-world environments. Okay. Option one is what the source calls manual labor. It's more involved, but very effective. The core idea is compile the exploit on your attacker machine where you do have GCC and all the tools you need, and then carefully transfer just the necessary precompiled bits over to the target.
Compile offline, then deploy. Makes sense.
Exactly. So the process involves a few steps. First, on your attacker machine, you run that same GCC command we broke down earlier, gcc shared -fpic-wl init woto limswoot 1337-so.2 woot1337.c. This creates your malicious shared object file, limswoot1337.so.2, locally, no target access needed yet. Second, you need to recreate the exact folder structure the exploit expects on the target, but you build it first on your attacker machine. So locally, you do mkdir-p woot etc. and mkdir wootlims. Then you copy your freshly compiled limswoot1337.so.2 into that wootlims directory, making sure it keeps the right name.
Got it. The compiled payload.
Right. Then you create the fake nswitch.conf file inside woot study with that crucial line, echo pathsubity.woot1337 woot to say nswitch.conf. And finally, just to be safe and mimic a real setup, you copy the etc group file from your attacker machine into your local woot directory too. The goal is to create this complete self-contained woot directory structure locally, holding everything the exploit needs pre-compiled and ready to go.
So you're essentially building the entire attack kit, pre-packaged, ready for a smooth deployment onto the target system. That definitely removes the GCC hurdle.
Exactly. Once you have this complete woot directory ready on your attacker machine, the next challenge is transferring it to the target. The researcher in the source demonstrated this using a simple Python HTTP server on the attacker box, python3-m http.server, and then using grubjiget on the target machine to download the files.
Okay, standard web transfer.
Yeah. But in real-world engagements, attackers might use various methods depending on what's possible.
Sure.
TCP, if SSH is open, maybe base64, encoding the payload and echoing it into a file on the target, or using other living-off-the-land binaries already present.
Right. Whatever gets the files across.
Whatever works. Now, WeGet typically doesn't download directories recursively easily, so the source mentions maybe zipping the woot directory first, transferring the zip, and unzipping on the target. Or perhaps a cleaner approach, just transfer the compile.so file itself, and then manually use commands like encode or echo on the target to create the woot etc wootlib structure and the nswitch.conf file and copy etc group locally on the target. Fewer moving parts to transfer.
More manual setup on the target, but less data transfer. Trade-offs.
Exactly. The researcher actually mentioned hitting some snags with this manual method inside their Docker container, some password issues, needing Dockerfile tweaks. It just reinforces that even seemingly simple manual steps can get tricky and require persistence in real complex environments.
But the principle holds. Compile off target, transfer the necessary bits, then run the sudo litwoot command.
That's the essence of option 1, manual labor. Now, option 2 is often much smoother, much faster for real-world use. The source calls it pre-compiled ninjutsu.
Hey, I like that name. Sounds efficient.
It is. This method completely bypasses the need for GCC and most of the manual setup on the target machine. It's incredibly efficient. What you do is leverage a public code repository. The source mentions one, like Zinslaun CVE-2025-32463 on GitHub, which conveniently provides already compiled versions of the malicious shared object file, .so file. And often these repos also include a simple bash script, poc.sha or similar, that automates the whole process of setting up the temporary directory, placing the precompiled .so file correctly, creating the fake nswitch.conf, and finally running the sudo and -r command.
So everything is prepackaged and automated by someone else.
Pretty much. The process for the attacker becomes remarkably simple. 1. Download these precompiled files, the .so and the .yet script, onto the target system, again, using robotget, curl, whatever transfer method is available. 2. Set executable permissions on the script, .cell plus xpac.sh. 3. Run the script, .tct.sh. And that's usually it. The script handles everything. As the source puts it, boom, got access achieved. Full root control instantly.
Okay, that sounds like the absolute go-to method for pen testers and red teamers in a real engagement. Speed, minimal dependencies, point and shoot almost.
It absolutely is. This precompiled approach is highly preferred. It's fast, reliable, and needs almost nothing extra on the target system. No GCC, no complex manual file creation under pressure. It's a true download and run scenario for privilege escalation.
And it really highlights that critical point you made earlier about optimization.
Exactly. It shows how quickly the community, both good and bad actors, takes a vulnerability disclosure and turns it into a weaponized, easy-to-use tool. An exploit quickly moves from being a complex research demo requiring deep technical skill to replicate to becoming a readily deployable package in an attacker's toolkit or a pentester's arsenal during an authorized test. It sort of democratizes the ability to exploit, which frankly have profound implications for defenders. They need to patch fast.
Wow. This has been an incredibly fascinating, really detailed deep dive into just one single vulnerability. But its impact is so profound. CVE-2025-32463 really stands as this powerful reminder, doesn't it? That even these incredibly mature, battle-tested tools like Sudo, tools we rely on every single day, can still harbor critical flaws with just massive security consequences.
It's humbling in a way.
It really is. It's like thinking your old, sturdy front door, the one that secured your house for decades, is absolutely impenetrable, only to find out there's this very specific kind of hidden way to fiddle with the lock's environment, maybe the humidity affects it just right, that lets anyone just walk right in.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Sudo's been around for ages, rigorously checked, trusted by millions, built into countless systems globally.
Yet this subtle interaction, this interplay between environment variables set by the I-R and the way the name service switch configuration is handled, it leads directly to full system compromise.
It's a stark testament to just how complex modern software systems really are, and the constant, relentless need for vigilance, even the most fundamental trusted components. Absolutely. And for security professionals listening, ethical hackers, pentesters, red teamers, this vulnerability offers a really significant opportunity. It allows them to tangibly demonstrate to clients or their organizations the very real risk that can come from overlooked configuration options or from subtle environment handling bugs within critical, trusted software.
That makes the risk concrete.
Exactly. It underscores that trust in any system utility, even the most fundamental ones like Sudo, has to be continuously reevaluated. You can never just take it for granted. And the key factors for successfully exploiting this, as the source meticulously showed, were all about precisely replicating those vulnerable conditions. And crucially, understanding the safeguards that modern distributions put in place, especially those backported patches. You can't just run a version check and assume vulnerability anymore. You have to dig deeper. This raises an important question, I think, for all of us involved in building and securing systems. How do we actually learn from these complex vulnerabilities? How do we use this knowledge to strengthen our defenses proactively rather than just, patching reactively after the fact?
Moving beyond just whack-a-mole patching.
Right. Because knowledge, ultimately, is most valuable when it's deeply understood and applied responsibly. That means things like responsible disclosure when new flaws are found, ensuring that any exploitation happens only in authorized, controlled environments during testing or research, and providing clear, actionable reporting that actually helps defenders understand the root cause and improve their posture.
So the whole ecosystem learns.
Hopefully. By doing that, we ensure vulnerabilities like this aren't just patched and forgotten, but are thoroughly understood across the security landscape. That understanding helps us build more resilient, more robust systems for the future. In this ongoing dance between offense and defense, there is always truly more to learn.
What an incredible journey we've taken today. Right into the hidden depths of system security, all focused on this one CVE. We went from understanding the foundational role of Sudo and the really intricate mechanics of CVE 2025-32463, through that surprising real-world lesson about backporting that caught even experienced researchers off guard, all the way to mastering advanced exploitation techniques that bypass common hurdles, like needing GCC on the target machine. We really hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, not just a list of facts, but a genuine aha moment, a real feel for how these critical system-level vulnerabilities work and that intricate, never-ending dance between the attackers and the defenders. So as you go about your day, maybe next time you type sudo or just interact with your computer, consider this final provocative thought. If a tool as fundamental as sudo, something hardened by decades of relentless use and intense scrutiny, can harbor such a critical flaw just because of how it handles its environment, what other seemingly stable, widely used tools might have similar, as yet undiscovered quirks hidden deep within their configurations? Maybe in how they parse input, or manage memory, or interact with other system components. What does that really mean for how we approach system security day to day? And how much trust should we place in the everyday software that truly underpins our entire digital lives? It's definitely a thought that keeps us all on our toes, constantly pushing the boundaries of discovery and defense. Keep that curiosity alive, ask those hard questions, and we look forward to our next deep dive with you.
Thank you for tuning into the Malfunction Radio powered by God Access. That was a great breakdown from Adam and Eve. It's been a pleasure guiding you through today's deep dive into the world of cybersecurity and red teaming. Remember, if it's not malfunctioning, we're not doing it right. Stay curious, stay secure, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye!